So everyone's awake now. Hello, and thank you so much for coming this bright and gorgeous morning before the rain comes. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time out. I'm just going to go. This may be a little bit easier. My name is Danielle Lewis Jones. I'm one of the consultants working on the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad New York Byway proposed designation. So we're super excited that everyone came today. As I said, my name I've already given. The other consultant on the project is is Cheryl Hargrove in the back with waving the hands. And so if you could advance the slide. Oh, what is Keystone? Oh, thank you. And so thank you for your patience. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, so we're starting a little bit late, but we should make up the time and be out before the scheduled end time. So here we have our agenda of what we're going to cover today. Sage is going to do the welcome from Erkneys, and then he's going to introduce the lovely Linda from the church, but also from the Mid-Hudson Anti-Slavery Project. And so then I will discuss the purpose of the meeting and why we're here today. We're going to review what a byway is and some of the concepts that we went over last year when we were here in Poughkeepsie, and then a presentation of everything that we have drafted for the corridor management plan, which is the reason that we're here to get public feedback on that. And then we will have a facilitated discussion about the things that you learned today, call to action, and then adjournment. Okay, so I'm going to give the microphone over to Sage to do the welcome, and then Linda will speak.
All right, thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you everyone here today. My name is Sage Hamilton Hazarika. I represent the Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State. We are a 501c3 based remotely around New York, consisting of various partners, organizations, and heritage sites that represent Underground Railroad and abolitionist history in New York State. One of our partners is the Mid-Hudson Anti-Slavery History Project, as you know, a local-based organization that chronicles and researches and produces programming around the history of abolition in this area. We also have representatives in Niagara Falls. Saladin Allah is a representative of the Niagara Falls National Heritage Area and Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center. We also have tourism partners. Karen Cool in the back represents Cayuga County Tourism. Cayuga County is the home of Auburn, aka Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown after her Civil War service. So we have a lot of different organizations that represent this history, and we come together in different ways to promote this side of history in ways that include developing tourism programs. The Harriet Tubman Byway is one of these initiatives. That being said, we're very happy that you're all supporting the work of your local Erkneys partner, the Mid-Hudson Anti-Slavery History Project. We're also happy to be here at the UCC in Poughkeepsie, and I also wanted to lend the mic to Linda of the Mid-Hudson Anti-Slavery History Project and this church to further welcome you. But if you have any questions about what the consortium does outside of the Harriet Tubman Byway Project, feel free to reach out to me or your contacts, Peter and Laura and Linda with MHAHP. Thank you again for joining us.
Well, good morning. I would like to welcome all of you here to the First Congregational United Church of Christ here in Poughkeepsie. I've been a 30-year member of that church, and I'm also a founding member of the Mid-Hudson Anti-Slavery History Project. So, you know, it's close to being 30 years old, but not quite 30 years old yet. And we're so happy that this is happening here in this area. And we hope that it comes to fruition soon. But if you have any questions about the church or about Mid-Hudson Anti-Slavery History Project, I am here. Dan here in the front is a member, and Anita over here is a member of that as well. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Linda. Okay. Saladin, if you could advance the slide, please. So what we're going to do now is have a brief overview of what a byway is, and some of the things that we discussed last year. So this is our second time here in Poughkeepsie. Last year we did a series of public meetings as well, and so one of the meetings was held here in this very church. So we're happy to be back. I see some familiar faces from when we were here last year. So we wanted to update everyone as to everything that was included in the corridor management plan based on your feedback. So what is a New York State byway? So a New York State byway is a community initiated corridor that has a particular statewide interest. So normally those interests fall into 6 categories, one being scenic, recreational, cultural, natural, historic, or archaeological. And so they tend to have 2 dual purposes, one being preservation, because when we talk about scenic, the whole point is to preserve the scenic viewpoint of it, but also economic development. Next slide. And so when we talk about economic development, we've done some case studies and some comps on, on byways that are similar either in scope as far as length of miles of the proposed byway or subject matter. And so the eventual goal of the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad's New York Byway is to first achieve state designation. That's the first goal. Then eventually achieving national designation. And then the ultimate type of designation is called an all-American road. And so what that would be a multi-state interconnected byway that goes all the way from Maryland, and they have a Harriet Tubman byway there. They were the first to be designated, going through Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and then connecting to New York, and eventually, hopefully, connecting to Canada. So the Maryland Harriet Tubman Byway, as you can see, has 251,155 net visitors that come to it annually, contributing over $23 million in sales. Their byway is much shorter than what the overall proposed would be for the Harriet Tubman New York Byway, because the Harriet Tubman New York Byway eventually, we are hoping, will go from Niagara Falls all the way through the Lincoln Tunnel. So we're talking about 550 plus miles. But we'll talk about what we're trying to achieve in designation in this round a little bit later. The Natchez Trace Parkway, you can see there, contributes $18.4 billion in direct spending, in creating over 271,544 jobs in the communities surrounding their byway. And then, of course, Journey Through Hallowed Ground generates $1.06 billion. And over 6,500 jobs. So when we talk about the proven economic benefit of byways, we have the numbers here to say this is something that has benefited communities. So next slide. No, I can't, honey, because I need to also look at the slide. So, so when we're talking about the Harriet Tubman New York State Byway, it's an initiative of the Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State. And so again, the goal is to connect related sites on the Underground Railroad, relating to the Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman and her time here in New York, that showcase the freedom seeker's journey here in New York. As we know, New York has a very unique story regarding its slavery history and so forth. So because of its unique story, we wanted to focus on that aspect because it's going to be slightly different than what you see in Maryland. So, however, the primary intrinsic quality, obviously, because it's based on a historical figure, is historic. And the themes would be common to the one that's in Maryland, which is faith, family, freedom, and community. Next slide. So when we talk about byway designation process, this is the overall process for New York State. It is different for each state. New York has a very detailed a very detailed designation process. As you can see, we are in the development of the corridor management plan area. But one of the things that I wanted to focus on is the second step, which may be a little bit small to see, but it says begin public and stakeholder outreach. The reason being is that your voices matter, and stakeholder engagement was something that was primary throughout the entire process because it's going to affect your communities. So in order to have a collaborative designation process, stakeholder engagement was always one of the primary focuses of the designation process, and one of the reasons, of course, why we're holding a series of public meetings. This is is it fourth meeting in Yes, fourth meeting in 2 days. So we're doing a whirlwind tour of 6 meetings in 4 days. And so to get the word out and to get feedback all along and throughout New York State. So we started in Buffalo, and here we are in Poughkeepsie. So we have definitely been road warriors and loving seeing and driving the byway and seeing all the beautiful places throughout the state. So one of the key things, though, in the designation process, which we will go into a little bit further a little later, is including the public engagement aspect of it. Once the corridor management plan is finalized, it has to go to DOT for the Scenic Byway Advisory Committee to approve. Once that is done, then it has to receive legislative designation. A bill has to be introduced. And so even in order for us to have approval and be approved by the Scenic Byway Designation Board, we have to have jurisdictional approval from every town, every city, as well as every county. It is not enough just to have the city approve it. The county with which it goes into also has to approve it, even if it's only 3 miles, even if it's not going all throughout the county. So these are some of the things that are a requirement for the New York State DOT. So I just wanted to have everyone who may not have been here before to understand that's one of the major factors in the process. Okay, next slide. So what is a corridor management plan? A corridor management plan is a strategic plan that's used to preserve, enhance, and promote the byway. It's used think of it as a 10-year strategic plan that's used for funding, that's used for designation, for development, as a way of stewardship to say, okay, now that this has been designated, how are you going to maintain it? So everything that you would have, whether it's in a business plan and so forth, when you're going to a bank to say, this is why this is what I'm going to do with the money that you're going to loan me in order to create a business. This is going to be the same thing. So for DOT, once it is designated, these are all the things that you have to say you're going to provide in order for designation, okay, to maintain it, because it is the community's responsibility to maintain it. And these are the different ideas of what we're putting forth in order to do that. So, okay, so project overview to date. In 2023, we under ERCNES, or the Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State, received a New York State EDA tourism grant. So the talks then began in late fall of 2023, where internal meetings were conducted to strategize. Then in 2024, we started CMP development, where the route was determined, and then doing site assessments, because for a historic designation for that particular intrinsic quality, you have to have proof. Why does it need to go through this particular place if there's nothing regarding Harriet Tubman or the Underground Railroad here? So we have to have a site inventory a list of places that say Harriet Tubman was here. This is a place that deals with the underground, that has historic significance to the Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman. So we have to provide proof of that for DOT to say, okay, then this justified to go this particular area. So we did the site assessments in 2024. Then we came and did the public meetings that I spoke of earlier in April through June to get your feedback, to educate what a byway is, and to get everything that you wanted in your particular community, because we know that what Niagara Falls needs, Hudson Valley may not need. And so what are some of the things that you would like to see from this particular byway? And so during that time, from April to June, we gathered that information, as well as through community surveys that were sent out. Then we generated the corridor management plan components based on that. So now we are in 2025. Yay. So now we have a draft corridor management plan, which we have here, and we can pass. Sage, can you pass this around if people would like to just kind of see? The corridor management plan is about 80 pages at this point. We anticipate that it will be many more. We don't have all the appendices added to it. And it's a living document. But in August of this year, we are then submitting the finalized draft with your input from these public meetings to DOT for approval. Okay, so during this time as well, we are collecting letters of support, as well as resolutions of support from each jurisdiction, as I mentioned before, whether it's town, municipality, village, as well as county. Though that has been the primary focus of our year so far. And in one of the upcoming slides, you'll see where we had to do some slight changes, because if slight changes to the route that we presented last year, because we're still working on getting some of those resolutions of support from the jurisdictions. Some didn't pass. Some didn't want it to go through their communities. And so, as we know, anyone who's been in, who's familiar with politics and everything, there's a lot of lobbying that needs to happen. And so, with resolutions of support, we've had to amend some things, as we've had to amend the route some due to the resolutions of support. So right now we're in the public meetings, as you can see, and we're obtaining feedback about the corridor management plan. It will also be posted on our website for you to go through it in a more detailed fashion to give feedback. And then once we receive those, then we're going to put them all in the draft corridor management plan and submit that to DOT. So again, this is a community-driven process. And when we go into the goals and objectives, you'll see that for those of you that were here last year, that everything that was in the meetings and talked about, all the comments, we collected and input into the draft. Okay. So key components of the corridor management plan include resources and resource interpretation. When we say resources, a lot of times people think natural resources, water, soil, things like that. However, in this particular instance, resources are actually, again, the sites and the proof that Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad sites were here. We have to prove that it's a historic byway. So those are resources and the resources interpretation. When we speak of that, that's the context. Then a stewardship plan. Again, we talked about how do you maintain something for 10 years. And so having a plan for that. Marketing, promotion, tourism, public participation, because again, this is a living byway. There will be participation and feedback from the communities who are impacted all throughout for the next 10 years. Then a traffic and safety plan, as well as signage, and then financial resources. How are we going to pay for it? So next slide. So when we talk about some of the key corridor management plan concepts, next slide. One of the things that we wanted to present was the project vision. So it's sharing authentic stories of Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad, and freedom seekers in New York. So using this as a vehicle for education, but also civic pride and civic engagement for visitors and for residents, because Harriet Tubman was an agent of change. And so inspiring people in New York and internationally and domestically in the country to say, you too can do this. So next slide. And so when we talk about byway support that we've received so far, we've received 91 resolutions of support from towns, cities, counties, or municipalities. Originally, the original proposed 550 plus mile route had over 170 jurisdictions that needed support and resolutions of support. Now, when we say resolutions of support, we're talking about going to, for instance, a city council where it has to be ratified and notarized, because this is in perpetuity. No matter administration change, it needs to be that this community or this town or this county is for this byway going through. Because once it's designated, it's designated. And so when we talk about municipal support and resolutions of support, that's what's needed in order to for the byway to have permission to go through the different communities. So in total, almost half, 244.02, because every little bit counts, of the original proposed byway route has demonstrated support for the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad byway traversing their communities. And so for community support, like partners here, like the First Congregational Church, 92 letters of support from citizens, churches, towns, your elected officials, and tourism entities. We've received that. And so in your chairs, there are draft letters of support. So if this is something that you are in support of, then please feel free to sign that, and we will collect those at the end of the meeting. But we also have principal partners, the Niagara Falls National Heritage Area, IRCNES, the NAACP, and NYSTIA. NYSTIA is the New York State Tourism Industry Association. And so a lot of your tourism partners have been very instrumental in helping to get the resolutions of support passed and putting pressure on elected officials to say, hey, this is going to be something that's very beneficial for our communities, and helping to get us over the finish line in various communities. Next slide. And so when we're talking about the proposed New York Byway, we weren't, again, due to the resolutions of support received, we have decided to move forward in segments so that all the work that was done by people who put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get this over this finish line, and to not lose momentum, we decided to go with 9 segments, which isn't uncommon. And my partner Cheryl will talk about that in more detail. And you see the 9 segments here. And then we have the various maps so that you can get more of a visual concept of the segments that we're going to propose for designation in the first round. And this is Cheryl Haregrove.
Thanks. So this is the entire map of where we plan to go from the Lincoln Tunnel all the way north up through the Hudson River Valley, over to Albany, across the state, dipping down into Peterborough, which is this little section here, and then over to Auburn, and then down to Geneva, across into Rochester, then dipping down into Buffalo, and then concluding at Niagara Falls. That was the original route. As Danielle mentioned, we had, and that's 550 miles. As Danielle mentioned, we've had a couple of situations where jurisdictions have declined participation, or they have actually not signed on to resolutions. So because of the extensive process that is required for byway designation, which includes as the draft is going around, a lot of different components, a lot of different information, but also a lot of detailed mapping of the route and other things. These 9 segments reflect what has been established and jurisdiction support as of last Friday. That's how fast we're moving on this. So one of the things I should mention is that where we have support and jurisdictions have passed, it is required that it's not only the county, but then also the town, the city, and village in that respective overlay of the route that must have jurisdiction support. So, for instance, in Dutchess County, we have a lot of towns and villages that have passed resolutions of support that have committed to this project. However, the county itself has not designated it so far. There have been conversations with DOT and asking for clarifications, which is understandable. This goes through a lot of different processes and things about what has to be included in the resolution of support. And one of it does include the agreement not to permit any future off-premise advertising signs, billboards, basically. And so that is a clarification that a lot of jurisdictions want to know what that means, and knowing that the ones that are currently there will be grandfathered in, but what kind of signs do they reflect? So there's been lots of those kinds of conversations, which is why this takes time. But as of now, on the Hudson River Valley, we are only, next slide, please. We are starting, these are the counties, and as you see, we've only got a couple of counties that are full support, and so that have all these layers of jurisdiction. And so those 9 segments do reflect where we have approvals that we can submit with confidence because we have them in hand and we're ready to go. Next slide. So the first is in the Bronx, and you can see the route directions, and the Bronx has not only done the county jurisdiction, but also the larger. We do not have New York County received yet. We have some of the community boards, but not the county itself, and that's why we cannot do that segment. Next slide. So in Columbia County, we have 3 jurisdictions of towns or villages, but we also have the county of Columbia County. We do not, though, have the towns that connect all 3, so we can't make a contiguous route. So we are recommending just the city of Hudson at this point, because it has as a resource, it can be documented that because of the Hudson River, also because of the Underground Railroad, that we have that as a resource that we can say has been documented and proven. So that is why we're looking at the city of Hudson as its own designation as a segment. Next slide. Then in Montgomery County, going across from east to west, Montgomery County, we did have, if you see this area here, this is Glenn. Glenn decided not to participate in the Byway. And so we had to then move the Byway route north, and where we were going 5 south to make sure that we were not paralleling a existing Byway. We had to go on to 5, which is where the Revolutionary War Byway is, but it does go through jurisdictions that have already approved, so we can safely go through all of Montgomery County. Next slide. This is Madison County, that includes Peterborough, as I mentioned, which is the Garrett Smith, the National Historic Landmark, one of the 5 travel with Tubman sites in New York, which was also a designation for us to say that the route needed to go this way. So that is totally passed. But as you can see, they had to get the county, they had to get these jurisdictions, and then to go through. Next slide. And then the city of Auburn, Cayuga County actually passed a resolution, but we have several jurisdictions that did not, that declined participation, which then limit our potential of being able to connect Auburn to other portions of the designated route and extend it throughout the county. So therefore, at this point, we are just going to look at the city of Auburn as a segment, because obviously it is Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown and also has the National Historic Park and several other key resources that we want to include. Then we move on to Seneca County. And so we've got this portion of Seneca County that they have approved, so we can actually add that. Next slide. And then Ontario and Wayne counties. I should mention that this should not be read. This is Geneva. They have not declined. We have just gotten notification. They had to amend their amendment. They submitted an original jurisdictional amendment. It did not include the byway exclusion of future permitting. So they have gone back and amended that. We are hoping that they will be submitting and approving that this week. So we're waiting on Geneva, but what we're looking at is that it would then start outside of the city limits if Geneva does not come through, and continue on through Wayne County. Next slide. And then this is the longest segment that has been designated. This is actually from Monroe and Orleans County into Niagara County. And so that is one entire segment that has passed through all these jurisdictions and includes Rochester and Holly and other kinds of communities. Keep going. And finally, it's the segment that dips down into Buffalo and then back up to Niagara Falls. And that has also been designated by both counties. So these are the 9 segments. I welcome comments, questions. This always has a lot of discussion, so we welcome that, and let us know. Yes, ma'am. It means that Dutchess County is not part of it at this time. What we are proposing, because we are doing a corridor management plan for all the 550 miles, is that we're looking at it in phases. We're looking at it that these 9 segments are phase 1, and that the hope is that the resolutions can continue to be gathered, and so that there can be a phase 2 right on the heels as once there are more segments included. If Dutchess County can come through in the next 30 days, there's a possibility that we could include it. But we have to submit the corridor management plan to DOT for the advisory board approval, which takes several months because it has to go to all the regional offices first. There has to be more studies with regards to compliance and other kinds of considerations. They have to do documentations themselves. And then, as Danielle said, you also have to have enough time to be able to get legislative support so that it can be introduced as a bill. The goal has always been for this byway to be introduced in January legislative session of 2026. And so that this is our interim step to make sure that at least a portion of the byway can go ahead and be designated. That does open up opportunities for funding. It opens up opportunities for marketing. It opens up opportunities for maybe pushing some of these jurisdictions that are on the fence about whether they want to do it or not, possibly over that finish line of being able to support this. So that's where we are. No. It's phase 2. It would be in it's part of a phase 2 where that next set, and hopefully it would be finishing out the rest of the 240 something miles to make it a complete 550 mile basis. It may have to be a phase 3, but it is that this is an incremental step just to keep the process moving forward. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, let me tell you who has already passed in Dutchess County, because I knew that that was going to be a question. And yeah, it's not, it is the community's responsibility. This is, as Danielle has mentioned, this is a community-led effort. So it's a community's responsibility to get that kind of support, to get that resolution through. We have draft resolutions that we have shared with everyone. We also have a advocacy team that has been spearheading those kinds of conversations and making sure people are connected. The tourism offices have been involved. And I know that Laura and Peter have been very involved in helping make contact. And so in Dutchess, you know, the city of Poughkeepsie, we have received that resolution. We've received it from Red Hook. We've received it from Rhinebeck, Hyde Park, Fishkill, Wappingham Falls Village, Wappingers, sorry. Wappingers Falls Town, we're just waiting for their signed resolution. We know it has passed, but we don't have that physical copy in hand. Tivoli is a question mark. Beacon declined. So we had to then do a little workaround, which is why we are now on 9 rather than 9D. So that's where we are. We also have in Westchester County, we've received resolutions from Yonkers and Peekskill, but we did not get the county yet. So that's why we can't move forward with Westchester County. And no, we just need the county, because we only need resolutions for the jurisdictions that the trail goes through or the byway goes through, because that's where you are not, you are making the commitment of preserving the scenic integrity. Even if this is a historic byway, it's still about preserving that scenic integrity and therefore having a regulation against future permitting of OPAS, off-premise advertising signs. Town of Poughkeepsie is, we just need their signed notarized resolution. So we've got, you know, again, it's passed, but we just need that copy. So that's where we are. Yeah. Correct. It is because the county still has to pass that. They'll not override what the local has. That's why you have to have the county as well as the local jurisdiction. I know that, let me go to,
I need to know with whom you make contact and where it's falling flat and how we work on it. I'm assuming you're right. Elected official, because when you go to that's who has to come off the front online and also give the note right time. So there may have been one here and more and person working on they may have taken a lot to do. But as you know, sometimes it takes the phone call and showing up and, you know, in letters to my. So there is a area later in this. And it's, while there are lots of us who have been through this, like the president of Berkeley, like like so many different things, there's had to be, you know, well, that this is going to be on the issue. It's time to get really, really fast and say, okay, you need to make that on music.
And so if you have any ask them, have you heard about it? You don't know specifically because when you're thinking about files, Cheryl and I do not know exactly what it is because we've done that up to local people because they know the relationship. They know who has the power to do things.
So is County Executive Hicks? Well, that is who Chris Colley at the Department of Transportation corresponded with at the request of Peter Bunton so that she could answer his questions directly. And therefore, what she clarified is, yes, you do have to have your own resolution. And yes, that resolution does have to clarify that you are not going to do any future permitting. Yeah. Yeah, and that's where Peter has been working very closely with Nikita, who's been leading this as far as coordinating where the jurisdiction resolutions are and stuff. So yes, ma'am. And I'll come back. Right. Yeah. Yeah, but until we get the resolution in hand, we are not counting it because we have to submit it to DOT. They have to have proof that it has happened and before they can start working on their aspects of it. So and I've talked to Peter about that because and we had to make a decision as to, on our timeline where we would proceed. So that's where we're just in a time crunch. Yes, ma'am. It's the whole county. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the county is but their restriction is only for the byway section. So it is not for the whole county. It is only for restriction of what that byway is, which is why we've provided them very detailed as far as the route, especially when the route changed. So that to go outside of Beacon, so that, it went to 9 and what that was. So we have provided that information. So the county has it. Okay. So any other questions about the route? Because one of the things we do want to spend a lot of time on and getting your feedback on is actually what's being proposed in the corridor management plan. And because we want to make sure that, as Daniel mentioned, all those segments that reflect, the priorities of what's really going to be the focus and be the benefits of this plan are articulated in this document, because that's kind of the Bible going forward on how to implement the entire byway. So even though we're going on 9 segments initially, the corridor management plan reflects the ultimate goal, as we mentioned in the vision, of a border-to-border route from the New York, New Jersey border all the way up to the Niagara Falls, Canada border. Okay.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we wanted to present to you the byway goals and objectives that we uh, that we came up with and that's in the corridor management plan. Next slide. So there are 5 goals uh, for the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad New York Byway. And so the first one is to identify and document information about Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad, and freedom seekers. So researching, documenting, interpreting, and marketing the stories of Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad, and freedom seekers. So whether it's utilizing existing research and documenting oral histories that the oral histories and other information, then conducting interpretive training for people that are going to be doing tours and so forth, and making sure that technology is being utilized to communicate the various messaging, creating and updating and maintaining digital communication tools, again, whether it's through apps, videos, through a website, so that the community, as well as byway visitors and residents, as well as any stakeholders, can interact with the byway. And then, of course, communicating regularly with corridor residents, communities, and stakeholders, because after designation, it really belongs to you. So obviously, making sure that the lines of communication and your input is being heard throughout. So next slide. Okay. Preserve and share authentic stories and places. Preserving and interpreting the documented stories and events related to Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad, and freedom seekers at natural and historic sites along the byway. So expanding visitor readiness and interpretation of resources. Again, when we talk about resources, we're talking about the various sites that people will visit that support that this was an area that Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad the places of Harriet Tubman and Underground Railroad. So tour programs for anywhere from school age children, which we have here, as well as to lifelong learners, because the whole point of a scenic byway is, and especially one of this scope and length, is that it spreads the love throughout the whole entire state. While you may have different areas that have large populations, there's so much history all throughout the state. And so that's one of the goals of a scenic byway, is for anyone who is a lifelong learner to interact with it and find out about the history that's here. Because a lot of New York residents don't know the extent of Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman history here. So then creating and implementing a corridor-wide stewardship plan, again, making sure that everything is maintained, that the quality of the byway is maintained, the quality of sites, et cetera, are maintained. And then identifying and encouraging strategies for safeguarding cultural strategies and historic viewsheds. So again, as Cheryl mentioned, one of the reasons or the main reason for the billboard component is to make sure that it remains scenic. Otherwise, it can, there can be a lot of interaction that ends up making it not quite as scenic that you would like to, get off and explore and learn and reflect. So next slide. So develop new authentic experiences, developing authentic and informative experiences to engage the byway user in the diverse stories of Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad, and freedom seekers here. Developing regional and thematic interpretive centers and kiosks. Again, even for 244 miles, that's a long stretch. And so put yourself, all of us have been visitors, and all of us hopefully have done road trips before. 244 miles is a long way to go with thematic information, and not having places and stops along the way that continue the story. And so having this along the 244 miles, 0.02, and then eventually the 550 miles will help to break up the information, but also each region has a different story to tell, possibly. So that's one of the reasons that we're developing the regional and thematic interpretive centers and kiosks for visitors as well as residents or whoever is driving the byway to interact with and learn the stories of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. Create hold on, back, thanks. Multimodal interpretive programs, because we know that it wasn't just by foot. It was documented that Harriet Tubman used the train. You know, there were many people that interacted with the waterways here. So making sure that that complete story is told of how they interacted with New York State. So whether it was recreational, train, water, and then you guys have a huge recreational area here where there are a lot of bikers, and so bicycle interaction is being included. Interpretive training sites. And then when we talk about, one of the big things that we heard throughout the public meetings is making sure that the African American communities were included in this, and that voices weren't, and that the voices of the people who are the descendants of these stories weren't overtaken by other voices. And so we made it a point, of course, to include those types of things. So encouraging collaboration with African American communities and prioritizing the Black-owned businesses in the area. We also heard, well, this particular byway doesn't go through Black neighborhoods. But as one of the things that we've always seen is that communities change. Harlem is no longer a Black neighborhood. Shaw District in DC surrounding Howard is no longer only a Black neighborhood. And so the community could change within the next 10 years. So making sure that the verbiage reflects that we want to have African American voices be at the forefront because it is an African American story. And so that's one of the objectives here when we're talking about developing new and authentic businesses and prioritizing the visibility of Black-owned businesses, whether it's restaurants and so forth throughout the communities. So next slide. So market the byway to attract visitors and their spending to communities to community sites and businesses to increase annual economic benefit. And so create and deploy innovative marketing tools and strategies, a lot of collaboration there. Market to school groups to attract groups and tour programs. Collaborate with other organizations and governmental agencies to promote the byway and expand the brand awareness. And then again, ensure African American communities and businesses are represented and elevated, whether it's in product development, interpretation, and marketing. So next slide. Sustain and grow the byway. So cultivating and maintaining diverse and inclusive byway leadership to identify resources, implement, oversee, and evaluate the impact of the corridor management plan. So of course, who's going to be responsible for doing all this? So making sure that there is a byway management structure that's been assigned so that there is an entity that's actually making sure that this happens and has oversight. Then funding the byway and all the various things, whether it's the activities or the signage, through diverse resources. Any of us who are in nonprofits, you know that you can't have one funding source, because once that one funding source goes dry, then you are in a bad place. So making sure that there are many different funding sources so that that the byway can continue in perpetuity. So foster leadership opportunities among people of African descent and youth to facilitate the byway's growth, diversity, and sustainability. Again, making sure that voices are heard and that leadership positions are there for people. And then collaborating with other organizations, businesses to leverage resources, effectively manage byway activities, and expand educational opportunities. For instance, these are where engaging the community and so forth is very, very important. You may know of different programs that are here within your area that can help fund, whether it is a specific grant that you may know of, whether it is a fundraising opportunity. Those are the things that you may know to where you can lend your voice to that. And then documenting, analyzing, and communicating the impact of the byway, because we know that while people can say, oh, well, I've seen an increase in business, I've seen more foot traffic, what does that mean? How much economically have you been able to say is due to the byway. So documenting that then goes to maybe some of the other places where it hasn't been designated, or they haven't designated yet, to say, look, these are the numbers. You can't deny the numbers. This is the reason why we want this here. And so having that proof and the documentation and analyzing that and communicating that to everyone will go a long way, so that we can have the numbers that we saw on the economic impact slide. Okay. So who's doing the work or who's here for governing it? The Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad New York Byway organization is the entity that will be created upon designation. It'll be a subsidiary of the Niagara Falls Heritage Area, National Heritage Area, with staff on loan and volunteers for the steering committee. It'll have a steering committee, a descendants council headed by Saladin Allah, who is a descendant of Josiah Henson, who Uncle Tom's Cabin was written about. And also Harriet Tubman relatives and other descendants from freedom seekers here in the area. And so their job then is to really serve as an approval to say that this is respectful and so forth, and to maintain the integrity of and the respectful aspect of the byway, because it's not recreational, this is personal. So these are people's families that we're talking about. And so maintaining that along in quality control along the byway. And then the committees, because tourism, interpretation, marketing, stewardship, and so forth are always active. They're always something that's needed. And then advocacy. So as we're talking about advocacy, the advocacy committee will be the one that goes in and is in charge of continuing for phase 2, and hopefully not phase 3, but for phase 2, and getting the other areas designated, but also for public engagement to make sure that you're seeing what you wanted to see from the byway. And then in phase 2, in 2028, hopefully we will have secured enough funding to hire staff. So there will be an executive director and people in development, but then also regional representatives, because by that point, again, this is aspirational for the entire 550 miles. There'll need to be someone as a representative for each community along the byway, or each region along the byway, to say, these are what our people need, because we know, again, that Finger Lakes and Niagara Falls may have a different need than the Bronx. So, or Hudson, obviously. And so there will be regional representatives at that point to make your voices heard. So next slide. So what are the needs? We briefly touched on this when we say that now it's time for grassroots. And if we know phone trees, we know all the different things that may be needed. One of the things that we found, and as many of you, if you haven't ever really dealt with with city government and so forth, it's not just a phone call. Sometimes it's not just an email. Sometimes it has to be showing up in person, speaking during the allotted time, saying these are things that have been brought to you at your city council meetings or at your county meetings, to say these are the things that we are interested in. No one here in this room has talked about it, and making your voices heard. So of our public meeting locations, again, Buffalo, Auburn, Rochester are the ones that have approved. For these meetings, we came back to places that we were in last year, where we first presented the concepts and the ideas. So make your voices heard, provide a letter of support, but also pledge for support for implementation once the byway is designated. We have byway letter of participation, which actually is more of more skin in the game, more action oriented, to say, okay, well, we know of this particular place. We have this meeting place. For instance, here, we have this in-kind donation, and we would love to have people here meet to talk about the byway like the church has done, in pledging support for after designation, to say the various things. We have this organization. I am an AKA, and as you can see, my lovely sorors are here. And so, Adopt a Highway, possibly, so for sororities and fraternities, encouraging undergrads to help and just having a community day. So those types of things are what we also need to submit to DOT, because they need to see that while, yes, I signed the letter of support and that means something, that people are actually committing to action once it's designated. And so, because it is a community driven thing. So next slide. So the byway designation timeline, Cheryl touched on this. Currently, we're in the public feedback on the corridor management plan. In August, we're submitting to DOT for them to go through their process, all in preparation for it to be introduced as legislation in New York State government in January. And so then hopefully we will be here again to celebrate in March and have designation celebrations along the different byway segments. So yay. Hosting the party, we'll also need that. So, okay. Next slide, please. And so here we have another area for facilitated discussion by Cheryl. If you have comments or questions that you may not want to verbalize, we have the notes and the note cards here that you can write them down, as well as pins. And then Cheryl is going to facilitate this particular discussion. So,
really where we want your input about what the next 10 years should look like. And so if you have specific questions or comments or thoughts about what should be in the corridor management plan, recognizing that there's a tourism section, there's a stewardship section, there is a marketing section, there is a resource interpretation section. There is also a traffic and safety. If you have questions about that, I'll have to defer them because it's not done yet. We're waiting on the segments that have to be pulled up, the signage program, and then also the finance and public participation. And we have very detailed prioritization for the next 10 years under each of those goals and objectives that Danielle outlined. And we do have a draft copy if you want to look at. This will also be online, integrating the comments from these public meetings so that we will have a more complete representative draft plan that everyone can comment on. You will get a link probably on Thursday, hopefully, if we get all the comments input by then. If not, it'll be early next week. That'll include this PowerPoint presentation, but also a link on how you can then review the public draft plan, and you can add comments directly on the website, which is the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Corridor NY.com. So, but this is really, I'd like to invite each of you to share comments, share questions, share things that you just want to make sure are recorded in this process. Anyone? Sure. Hi, Mary Jo. Right. Yeah, where the funding came from to support the effort was, it was a grant that was through the EDA, which is Economic Development Authority of New York, which is through federal. And so that paid for this process. Yes. Right. So the question was, with the changes in the federal funding strategy, what the impact will be. I've had to deal with this on more than one occasion, as you can imagine. So the, you know, the thing that I've learned over the past 30 years in working in cultural heritage tourism is that you don't put all your eggs in one basket anyway. And one of the things that the funding section looks at is how this can be a leveraging opportunity to not only secure grants, but also then other kinds of creative funding that involves visitors, where they're involved in supporting the Byway along their travels or through other kinds of forms. So we've looked at it not only from a soft money perspective, but also from a revenue generation perspective. So it could be branded merchandise, it could be other things that are generating money. And then also looking at what private foundations, such as Mellon or such as the African American Heritage Fund at the National Trust, where I used to work. I used to work for the National Trust. And, there's still a lot of money out there. And so it's just made it a little bit more challenging to perhaps find. But that's where also when you've got a collective entity like this that can go out and then support all of the local organizations along the route, that can make it where it sometimes is more compelling for a funder. And which we have seen in other byways, that they are able to secure money when maybe an individual nonprofit along an individual portion of the byway is not able to. So it is looking at how to make sure that the byway becomes a conduit for raising funds, not just for the administration of it, but really to get that project on the ground, and whether that's through a re-granting program or whatever. And some of that is addressed in the financial resources section so far. So I encourage you to just peruse that, because we've got some ideas in there, but it's going to be more robust. And also looking at the fact that even the Federal Highway Administration, which is under where the federal byway program exists, still has funding often for byways, even with these substantial cuts to other kinds of programs. So once you're designated as a state byway, it does open up opportunities for funding through new channels that were not perhaps available before.
Yeah.
Because as we're talking about funding, I've already kind of mentioned the whole thing of grassroots. When we talk about funding, we always think of the big checks and so forth. But there's nothing to say that there can't be a pancake breakfast thrown, to raise funds to say, okay, we're going to help to continue this initiative. So when we're thinking for each organization that we're in, if you're in the Rotary Club, if you're in, a commerce club, if you're in a gardening club, whatever it may be, there's nothing, or individual, there's nothing to say that different civic organizations and just other organizations can't do things locally. And so when we're talking about like the letter of participation, it may be that it's, again, very diverse and every little bit helps. So just challenging people to think about also other ways of funding, because this is the community. If you know someone who's an amazing singer, maybe throw a concert to say, okay, well, we're going to, donate the funds from that to go to support the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad New York Byway. So I'm from Atlanta, so I thought of like Coretta Scott King is how she did like the concerts after Dr. King died to help support. But there's so many different things that as a grassroots initiative that we can do to help support.
Yeah, and it really is going to be dependent on what is appropriate for your community, what is also in concert with other things that you're doing. And so one of the things that was mentioned in an earlier meeting was having byway calendar so that you can actually then look at what else is happening so that you could coordinate those kinds of activities and other things like that. So it's a work in progress. And one of the things that you may have noticed on the staffing chart is looking at having somebody who would be in charge of development. And it is all those kinds of activities, such as organizing maybe a trail, a byway wide event that would happen in along different places. So other questions? Yes, ma'am. And then while you're at it, go head over to the other paper meeting houses and then go to the Harriet Tubman Byway. So halfway trail, probably get on board. Well, one of the things there, so I'll have two answers for that. One is that there is a secondary intrinsic quality that's going to be recreational. And the reason for that is because the hope is to eventually go for national designation and all-American road status, where you have to have two intrinsic qualities of the collection. So historic is the first, but we're also looking at recreation, and part of that does include, for instance, the Empire State Trail, and then also the Erie Canalway, just because it parallel both of those, and then the Hudson River, they all parallel some part of the trail. So that is looking at those other kinds of opportunities. The second answer to your question, though, about spillover effect is that, travelers don't really care about lines. And so what we find with byways is that if you're giving them opportunity to linger longer, to stop along the byway, then they can collect information about, well, I'm interested in this, what else is in the region? And so part of, like, for instance, the marketing committee, which will have all of the tourism promotion organizations involved, is talking about, well, this byway's going through, but while you're in our county, while you're in our community, you can then see these other elements. So that's where educating people about what's there so that they can then extend their stay, that increases their economic impact, hopefully, that maybe there's a restaurant they'll go to as well, maybe they'll do some shopping. All of those components that then help to support the economic impact. And that then adds to that kind of, the attribution, the byway brought me here, but then I'm going to get out and see other things as a result.
There might be an example from Cayuga County, one of our neighbors to the northwest, where the Harriet Tubman Byway route only goes through a portion of Cayuga County presently, but there's plenty of history, including that of Harriet Tubman, outside of the immediate boundaries of that route, and that's something that we would anticipate working with our tourism partners, like Karen, so that they know, yes, what is on the byway, what's off the byway, but then they also have the opportunity in their normal marketing year round to anticipate visitors that would be experiencing other history aspects. So then that's coordination with the tourism partners as well.
There's also the fact that this byway is focusing on the time period from 1800 to the start of the Civil War. And so, for instance, in Geneva, There is a Travel with Tubman site, which is the Smith Opera House, but it's not going to be technically included on this byway as a resource because it actually deals with her time supporting the suffragette movement. So where that is a classic case where people that are interested in Harriet Tubman would say, well, I'm also going to go there because I want to learn more about, you know, her time after the Civil War. So that is where those kinds of connections can be made. Those are itineraries that can be done through all those themes that, an itinerary based on the churches along the route, you know, that goes to faith. An itinerary that goes along the community, talking about all of the different communities and their input. I mean, so there's lots of different ways to expand visitation based on the route. But to get designated, we have to focus on Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad initially. Okay. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes, and freedom seekers. Although one of the things that, because the name is Harriet Tubman and Underground Railroad, that's our focus for the resources. The freedom seekers provide us a unique perspective from a personal story. And it does help also connect past to present, which, you know, I've been involved in heritage tourism for a long time. And if you look at the definition of heritage tourism, it is traveling to experience the places that authentically represent the people past to present. And so it's looking at not just that time period, which is the important context, but also then, you know, how people live, work, and recreate today. So, yes. Yes, sir. Not that the question is, has there been outreach to tour operators, bicycle companies, and others who plan events and or bike associations? Thank you. Yeah. That Right. Great idea. Thank you. And so that idea is to go out and get support for from bike associations about how they would like to engage in the byway and experience it via bike. The other question that we had earlier, I'm trying to make sure I capture everything that is said. So was about freedom seekers. Because all of the, and I want to just, the reason I'm trying to make sure I capture everything, because all of this is going to be integrated and made sure that it's touched on in some way in the updated corridor management plan. So thank you. Yes, sir. We'll, great. We'll investigate that. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, things that you feel are very important to make sure are included in the corridor management plan, especially for those of you who are on the, you know, in this region and where you may not be designated in the first round, but it's going to be important to make sure that your thoughts and concepts are included, you know, in the long haul.
Yeah, I'll hold like that.
No, maybe yeah.
It is classified in the letter.
Okay. Anything else? Any other comments? Yes. Hi. Yeah. Does the plan include? Yes. Yeah, that's very important. Thank you for sharing that. And who's in charge of this right now, the walkway ambassadors? Oh, great. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Huh? Yeah.
So in terms of I'm Saladin Alam, chair of the Descendants Council. So in terms of volunteers, that's not even something to consider after designation, like as we're moving right now, you know. A letter of support from that organization will be definitely important in terms of participation. And then also any organizations that you're connected to, saying that you're willing to support this not only as individuals but also as an organization, and that's important because as the byway comes through these areas, it's owned by the community, and it's also important that, you know, it's only a matter of time before you have others that see the value in this, and it may just be an economic value. They may not care much about Harriet Tubman or freedom seekers, but they may just see the economic value of it, and that may be their interest. And if it's not rooted in the community, it'll be easy to be commandeered by people that don't have the right intentions of why this is being created. And that's why it's important that we have our community in the foundation and making sure that it's rooted in the integrity of what this is about. So we need all of you, and that's why we're here.
I think that's a great closing month.
Okay, next slide, please. So, requested assistance and how can you help? As we've already stated, we have deadlines. And so by July 15th, we ask that you read and comment on the corridor management plan, which we will have the information on the next slide as to where that can be found on the website. And then provide letters of support for the byway to include in the CMP, which you have there in your seats with your agenda. Commit to participation after the byway is designated by completing a letter of participation. Again, that can be found. We have examples of it here with us, physical examples, but you can download that from the website to take back to your organizations and put it on letterhead and so forth. And then for round two, for instance, for Dutchess County and so forth, contact your local leaders in order to let them know and let your voices heard that you want them to pass a resolution of support. So next slide. And so to review and give input, again, to view public meeting questions, because we will post this starting July 3rd. Give us a little time. We hope. Yes, and we'll send you an email to let you know exactly when it is. And so, but it will be soon. So just be on the lookout for that. And to view the public comments from other meetings, as well as any updates, and to download the economic impact data. We have a one pager to where you can use that as a resource to take back to your elected officials or your organizations or anyone that you want to talk about for the Byway. And then here we have the website address. So if you need to take a photo of that so that you can go and download all of the information that I just discussed, then please do so. And then you would send that to Sage, whose email address is at the bottom.
It also includes a list of resolutions received to date. So if you wanted to just check and make sure that, the status of any resolution, you can check that website, and that's current as of Friday. We hope. And we're continually updating that, but that's where we are right now. Yes, ma'am. So there's two different letters that we're requesting. The first is a letter of support for designation of the byway. And that's what you've got a sample of. And that can come from the church and just say, we support this. And we've drafted you could sign that, or you could actually do something that's more specific as to why. But that's the first letter. The second letter is that participation letter. So after designation, we're going to offer this space if the Byway Committee wants to, hold a meeting, or that, whatever you would like to propose. Or that you don't even have to propose a specific, just say, I want to work with the steering committee to identify ways that we can participate and show our local support for this project. Or if you want to go ahead and advocate for making sure that the rest of the byway is, has resolutions of support, that you'll be an advocate for that. That's another way of, demonstrating specific participation in the process going forward. Okay. We leave it up to every institution to identify what works best for them. And and that's whether it's a nonprofit, a church, or a business, or a government. Other? Well, thank you so much. We got you out in less than 3 hours. So we appreciate that, but we also very much just appreciate your support. Thank you.